recently, tenders for offshore wind parks have changed a lot. Much more focus on quality, system integration and ecology. And instead of subsidized, they go to the highest bidder. But economic tides turn fast. Can we have it all? Price competitive and with high quality. Here to talk is Frank Omen. You're the head of offshore wind Benelux at BP. You have a long career in the offshore sector, but you recently joined BP. Why?
Well, that's a simple story, but indeed I just joined BP only, less than 1 month ago. So I'm here with a number of prep messages and with my personal experience. And to be honest, last 5 years I was not even in the wind sector, I was in the solar sector. But 16 years ago, I did join offshore wind already. I did join the renewables. And why? The question why we do what we do is always very important. I do believe there is the need for the transition. I do believe we have to change the energy system. And then in the Netherlands, you can do that in many different ways. We have the offshore wind, we have onshore wind, we have solar. But what we see in the Netherlands at this moment, onshore, opposition against wind, solar, the same. So I really doubt whether the regional energy strategies, the so-called RES strategies, that they're going to deliver. Whereas at the same time, as you mentioned, subsidies are out now for offshore wind. So the sector has become viable, it has become economical. So offshore wind is the solution for the energy transition in the Netherlands. So that's my personal why on offshore wind. Then your next question could be then why BP, which I fully understand. Well, with offshore wind becoming larger scale every time, and offshore wind also need to become an integrated energy business, I do believe at BP we are very well positioned to deliver on that. So offshore wind in itself is big, it's great, it will become huge, and all those electrons have to come to shore. That's a concern, as people can tell you from TenneT, to get the electrons on shore. But then the next concern is to get all this connection, all these electrons, one way or another, absorbed in the energy system. And doing so, we need hydrogen, we need other solutions. So we need this integrated solution. And that's, I feel, where BP can make the difference. So on the one hand, being strong on large projects, strong in offshore wind. On the other hand, having the experience with molecules, with hydrogen, being able to handle hydrogen, that combination should put BP in a position to be a key player in the market.
Last year we had a discussion also with BP here on the stage where they explained the Hollandse Kust West. You're not only focused on producing the cheapest energy possible, but focused on quality, system integration, ecological preservation. That is your focus. Are tenders focused on that?
Well, I think the tenders are focused on that. So I think we're quite well aligned in the Netherlands on what we try to achieve. In general, not on every single topic, so I will address a few of those other topics as well. However, the way the tenders are structured is maybe not the best way to achieve the goals that we're looking for at this very moment. I think everyone knows that the offshore wind industry worldwide is a little bit in turmoil. There are things happening and some tenders are failing. So it can happen, it's maybe a blunt comment, but tenders can fail. So we have to think very well, we, being the sector, being the government, together we have to think very well how we are going to structure those tenders. And what we see now, I mentioned I'm in BP now for 1 month. I did solar for a while. So for me it's the old way of doing tenders in offshore wind in the subsidized era. And now I come back in the new era. So for me that's a good combination to look at. Looking back, the old days, 16 years ago, 15 years ago, the first tender. We started with the MAP subsidy, then SDE first tenders. 181 euros per megawatt hour as a cap. So highly subsidized business. First tenders, and the aim for the Netherlands, the aim for the sector to go to net, to zero subsidy tenders. And that's been achieved in a remarkable short era of time, remarkably short. Why was that possible? Very, very simple. Tenders were clear, transparent and easy, simple tenders. and there was a lot of de-risking provided by the government. So that's what drove all the business to zero subsidy. Some bit was innovation, a large chunk was to support the de-risking by the government. That was then. Now is now. If you look at the low-cost de-risking, that's what we need to make the business progress, what we need to make offshore wind an even bigger success. And what we see now is, in fact, the worst of both worlds. So, on the one hand, we see that the risks are fully at the developer. We are in a merchant market now. There's no subsidies. That's what we're proud of. So it's a merchant market, full risk. But also a lot of costs are added to the system. Costs are added to the developer. And if they're added to the developer, well, in the end, it comes back in the energy price. In the end, it comes back at the consumer, so it's a societal problem.
From a government point of view, this totally makes sense, because there is a lot of money to be made in offshore wind, but we want it to be integrated in the system, because it shouldn't be focused on just the wind alone. And second, there are some externalities that we want to either avoid or compensate it, because in the past we've seen that often the profits were private and the risks were public. We don't want to repeat that mistake again, don't we?
No, I fully agree to that. However, some of the costs can be avoided. Some of the costs can be avoided, not for the developer or for the government, but for society. And that's one thing. The other thing is we also have to look at those elements that make sense in a tender. And that's a tricky remark. Does it not make sense what we're doing at the moment? But let me start by explaining where I see that we have a necessary, costly way of doing the tenders in the Netherlands. We're talking about the Netherlands at the moment. And maybe go back to what's really good in the Dutch system. So what do you need to develop a project in renewables? You need a grid connection, you need a land plot, you need a permit, and you need a business case. And in the Dutch system, it was and still is the case that you have to do quite a lot of work up front, but once you win the tender, you have your land plot, you have your permit, you have your grid connection. Now it's just about getting the business case. So that's the good bit. What's been added now is a number of additional requests, the so-called NPCs, the non-price criteria in tenders. And the number of those non-price criteria drive up the workload for the developers. You can say, well, that's the concern of the developer. Yes, it is. However, we are all doing the same exercise. Take, for example, ecology or circularity. In the Netherlands, assume we have, say, 10 bidders, and you spend 1 million on preparing a bid on ecology and circularity. What do? We all run to the same bureaus. We all run to Imaris, to Wageningen, to NEOS, etc., etc. We do the same exercise 10 times. At the end, there's one winner. So the total cost, 90% is cost, 10% is for the winner. Still, it's a good idea to work on circularity and ecology, and we fully support that at BP. But you can do it in a different way. You can do it in a way that you, at front, you make sure there's commitment for the developer, but the actual cost, the actual program that you're going to deliver on ecology, you make it independent of the different developers, of the different projects. And you create like a governmental program or a joint industrial program or whatever way you want to call it. You create a common program that makes this cost, the costly approach upfront lower, but also makes the knowledge gained available for everyone. And it's not just about money, it's also about access to the wind farm, access to data that you can share, which I think in the long run is the better societal way of spending money rather than, well, making it a storytelling exercise and the one who uses the best words based on the information of the same specialist wins the tender. That to me doesn't make sense. So yes, societally it's a better idea. So that's on ecology and circularity.
if I'm the government, how to deal with this? Because you're going to talk to me and say, I don't like the way you tender, we can improve it. On the one hand, you're the expert because you have to fill out the tender. So I can really use your insight and your knowledge. On the other hand, yeah, your interest is to have less costs and more profit. How can I make most benefit of the insights from the industry in drafting my tenders?
Well, there are at several levels, at the different stages, including this stage, there are conversations about this topic, of course. So being here today at this moment is also trying to get the message across. Let me give you another example on floating solar. In my previous job, we developed solar plants, also floating solar inland. Floating solar inland. That is possible. And it is possible at the cost subsidized. So subsidized, it's possible to develop a floating solar project where the waves in a harsh winter are maybe knee-high. So that's possible with subsidy. Now in the current tender, it's assumed to build a large chunk of floating solar offshore in really harsh conditions, when it's not 50 centimeters, but 15 meters of wave that have to survive. At a stage where the technology is not that far yet. So in fact, the offshore wind development is burdened by developing a different technology. And you could say, well, that's a good idea because we have cable pooling, and then I know the argument. But simply, the TRL level, the technology development of floating solar, isn't there yet to bring that into a tender. So at the moment, back to the title, cost and quality, it's not adding to the quality of the energy system offshore. It is adding to the cost and risk for the developer. So it's not helping the tender.
Is the main question for the government, do it smarter or try less to have it all and make most money from the tenders and have a lot of quality qualifications in it?
I would suggest more focus. More focus on the ecological and circularity side to combine our efforts. 12 years ago in the round 2, I was involved in a passende beoordeling. I don't know the English word, but we did it with 5 different developers together. So yes, we are competitors, but we're also colleagues. You can work together. So some of the items we can do together. So make it simple, avoid unnecessary cost. There's nothing wrong with having ecological and circularity requirements in the tender. But there's one other topic I would like to point at. And the other topic is about system integration. And system integration, as I mentioned, is one of the reasons why I believe BP can be a relevant player in this field. So system integration is what's needed to really make the next leap in offshore wind. So we can do all those electrons offshore, then we can get the electrons onshore, and then we have to create molecules, or maybe even create molecules offshore. And that, at this moment, does not fly. The business case does not fly. So once you have a business case for offshore wind that does fly, you also have in the combination, you are required by the government, or required for the tender, you want to deliver on the system integration, but one part of the chain does not do the math. It does not work. So that combination, in order to make that fly, in order to make that system integration work, also that part needs to have a different form of support. Doesn't mean money, can also be de-risking.
We are, right now, today, we started forming a new government in the Netherlands. I know you just started this job, but in case they ask you as new Minister of Energy, what would be the key instrument to get system integration going?
Well, I think it's about, first of all, it's about the hydrogen support. Look very well at the value of hydrogen, the cost of hydrogen, and how to integrate it into the system. Take that analysis, look at how quickly we can do that, and then make sure that the instrument match that requirement. And then it can fly. If you look back at offshore wind again, 15 years in offshore wind, we looked at very high subsidies. Well, we had to climb a mountain to make it happen, and all of a sudden it was there. I'm convinced the same will happen with system integration, especially with hydrogen.
Is this a question on the national scale or EU-wide?
Of course, energy is a global business. So we have to align, certainly we have to align with the European requirements here. Yeah.
You might expect a call any moment now for a new Minister of Energy. Thank you so much, Frank Oomen.